All right, Bible and Daily Lifers. We are going through the Bible in a year, the whole Bible. So can't go line by line, certainly can't go syllable by syllable, but we can go section by section. So where are we now? We're in a new book, and we'll be out of a new book today. So this is the book of Ruth. Ruth comes at a particular time, during the time of the Judges, really. We had just finished the book of Judges. And Ruth could be a story just sort of stuck in there somewhere. Because in the book of Judges, it was all about this cycle that happened. Things were going good. The people forgot about God. They forgot about God. They ended up with the consequences of forgetting about God. They ended up in bondage or under attack by other people. They cried out to God. God rescued them. He raised somebody up, somebody that we called a judge. They would deliver them, give them freedom. People would rest in that freedom. Thank God. Thank you, God, that you took care of us. Same. They'd forget about God. And these cycles went through several times. It says these cycles were about 40 years or so. And you have, your, almost dozen or so judges that happened there. And, many of them were going for 40 years, peace for 40 years, and then trouble again, and just up and down, around and around. Judges ends by saying that there was no king and everybody did what was right in their own sight. And most of the stories are a little bit distressing. There aren't a lot of really good, happy stories, but you could just insert the book of Ruth right in there. So, overview of the Bible again. First 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the law of Moses. Then we had Joshua, them coming into the land, and Joshua helping conquer. And then the 12 tribes settle where they settle. The book of Judges, they're in the land, and we start this crazy cycle. So now we're in the book of Ruth. And again, just take the book of Ruth and just drop it somewhere, anywhere, into the Judges, because we don't know exactly when it happened, but we know that it happened during that period. And it really is the story of a faithful person who's an outsider to the people of Israel, to the family of Israel. And this is so interesting because in the New Testament, Jesus comes to his people, to his own, and those who would have known the scriptures, those who would have grown up with the scriptures, and you think that they would be open and receptive, and not so much so. And then Jesus finds these outsiders who are very receptive. So Ruth is at least a little bit of a parable to that, and it really demonstrates the goodness, the kindness, God desires for us. So let's just read the story, read the account. Somebody told me I shouldn't call them stories, I should call them accounts. Well, that's true, they are accounts. I don't want to say stories so that they sound like maybe they're not true, or just some parable with some moral meaning. But this stuff happened. Watch. Ruth, chapter 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. Such a familiar story in the scriptures, these famines. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and his 2 sons. There's a famine. The guy takes his wife and his 2 sons, and they went to live in Moab. So they leave the land of Israel, they leave the promised land, they leave Canaan, and they go to Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. And the names of the 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephraimites from Bethlehem and Judah, and they went to Moab and they lived there. So they were escaping the famine. This is something that happens several times in the scripture. The families escape famine. Well, now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. So the husband dies, and she was left with the 2 sons. Well, they married Moabite women because that's where they were. They were living in Moab, so they married these Moabite women. One the Moabite woman was named Oprah, and the other Ruth. And so again, there's another name of a place that looks similar to that, Oprah, and they say that's where Oprah Winfrey got her name, but they spelled it wrong. So be that as it may, the other was named Ruth. They lived about 3 years, and both the sons died. Well, what a tragic story. So there's a husband and wife, and they got a couple of boys, and the famine's in the land, so they go to Moab, and there the dad dies, and then the sons marry girls, and then the boys die, and so the mom is left with these two daughter-in-laws, Naomi and Ruth. And so when Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of the people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return. So they heard that they can go back. The famine's over. You can go back home now. Well, her daughter-in-laws left the place that they'd been living, and they set out on the road. But Naomi said, "You know what? Like, you don't want to go with me. Why do you want to go with me? There's nothing there, and what am I going to do? These, even if I had sons now, what are you going to do? Marry them in 16 years, 18 years?" But go back to your mother's home. Go back, and may the Lord show you kindness. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate the loyalty that you're showing to me. And she kissed them goodbye, and she wept aloud. And they said, "We're going to go back to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me?" And what happens is, Ruth, in verse 16, chapter 1, she said, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." Wow. "Where you die, I'll die, and there I'll be buried. And the Lord deal with me, be it ever severely, if even death separates you from me." And when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. Ruth's going to go with her. She's going to go back to Canaan, to Israel, to the promised land, to the place that they were living, the daughter-in-law. With what? They don't have anything. They don't have a thing. They have nothing. But they're going to go back together. And the women went on until they came to Bethlehem. Oh, Bethlehem shows up over and over again throughout the course of the scriptures. And they returned, and they were accompanied, and they stayed in Bethlehem. It was time for the harvest. The barley was being harvested. Well, chapter 2, Naomi had a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. So there's a guy, this guy is pretty rich. This guy is doing okay, this Boaz guy. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick the leftovers behind anyone whose eyes I see." You see, they could, if the grain was left there, they could pick it up. It was just a rule in Israel, or the stuff that falls down, they can pick it up. And so Naomi said, "Go ahead." And she went out into the field, and she began to follow the harvesters. And it turned out that it was Boaz. Boaz, the rich relative. And he's a good man. He's a real good man. And Boaz learns about this girl, and he learns about his relative. He learns about Ruth and learns about Naomi and what they're doing. And he's like, "Man, you're a good girl, and he's going to marry the girl. He'll marry the girl, but he's got another relative that is closer that could marry her." You see, what would happen is, if you were a widow, then the closest relative would marry you and take you into the home so that you could survive. It's very difficult for a woman to survive. So the nearest relative could do that. And then what happens is, this guy Boaz, he tells him, he goes, "Hey, there's a field that belongs to Naomi, and she's got another girl with her, and if you want to buy the field, you can buy it." The guy was like, "Yeah, I'll buy the field. I'd love to buy the field." And he said, "Well, if you buy the field, then you get the girl as well." And he was like, "I don't want the girl. I don't want that girl." And so he says, "Well, then I'll buy it." And he goes, yes, you go ahead and buy it." And so this whole story goes through, and Boaz marries her. And the way that the story falls out is kind of interesting. It's such a great thing that's happening here. He marries her. But here's what happens in chapter 4. Boaz took Ruth, the Moabite girl. Remember, she's the daughter-in-law of Naomi, and Naomi comes back, and Boaz is a relative, and he buys the field, and she comes along with it. And so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he made love to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Now she has a son. And the woman said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer." Talking to Naomi. Because Naomi now comes into the picture, and she's coming along for the ride. without a guardian redeemer. May he be famous through Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. Now you've got your grandma here, and the girl loves you, and she's sticking with you, and they're going to take care of you. But something else happens. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him, and the women living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. Now, Obed is the father of Jesse, and Jesse is the father of King David. So the son here has a son named Jesse. Jesse has a son. They named the kid Obed, and then Obed has a son, and his name is Jesse, and then Jesse has a son, and his name is David. And this is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Abinadab, Abinadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, Boaz the father of Obed, Obed the father of Jesse, Jesse the father of David, David the great-great-great-great-grandfather of Jesus. David, and then Solomon, and then through the family tree going all the way back to Abraham. God is preserving the family line of Jesus Christ through this amazing story. And this woman ends up in the genealogy of Matthew. This woman in the genealogy. This Moabite woman, this outsider, who all of this happened. She's a wonderful person. She's a wonderful girl. And all of the great things that happened to them, the Lord providing for them, but then she being in the family tree of Jesus. God was setting the whole thing up, protecting it, and making sure that the family of tree of Jesus was going to happen. Famine couldn't stop it. Nothing could stop it. Jesus was going to be born and be the Redeemer of humanity, the Redeemer of mankind. So there you have the story of Ruth. We'll be into another part of history in the next one. Hey, bless you. That's Ruth.